A war-scarred alien claimed no species could care, until one impossible act collapsed her entire belief. It wasn't a weapon or a treaty, just a human who dared to risk everything without expecting anything back. And when the galaxy demanded proof, both of them crossed a line no one thought survivable. Tell me where you're watching from. Subscribe to join our journey, and let's begin. The Ealer soldier fled before Michael Grant could finish his sentence. It happened again. The third patient that morning who took one look at his human hands and bolted through the cracked doorway of what used to be a medical center. Michael exhaled slowly, watching dust motes dance in the slanted light cutting through the bombed-out ceiling. Varella's twin suns turned everything amber this time of day, which almost made the ruins look beautiful if you squinted. He returned to his makeshift desk, a repurposed cargo container that wobbled when he wrote. The clinic occupied what remained of the city's eastern district, where humans and Ealer now attempted something the treaty called coexistence. Michael preferred the term organized awkwardness. The morning had brought two Ealer with shrapnel wounds they refused to let him touch, one human veteran who spat at his feet, and now this runner. He logged each interaction in his battered datapad with the same careful notes he'd kept since opening the clinic 6 months ago. Patient 47, arrived earweight 20. Exhibited extreme fear response to human proximity, departed 0823. Evidence isn't loud, he reminded himself. It's consistent. Footsteps approached, but these were measured, purposeful. Michael looked up. She stood in the doorway like a question mark rendered in flesh. Ealer, clearly her skin that distinctive gray with luminescent traces that pulsed faintly at her temples and along her forearms. Tall, even by Ealer standards, with the kind of stillness that made you think of frozen lakes just before they crack. She wore a patched military uniform, the insignia carefully removed but their ghosts still visible. In her hands, she carried a plate of food. Michael's instinct was to smile, to offer the chair, to fall into the comfortable rhythm of intake questions. But something in her expression stopped him. Those eyes, dark as Varella's night side, held no warmth, no hostility either. Just evaluation. She crossed the room without invitation, set the plate on his desk between them, and sat in the chair reserved for patients. The food remained untouched, some kind of grain mixed with local vegetables, still steaming. Then she spoke, her voice flat as processed steel. "Prove that humans care." Michael laughed. Not unkindly, but the way you do when someone makes an absurd philosophical challenge at 9 a.m. He gestured at the clinic around them, at his well-worn jacket with its faded humanitarian insignia. "I mean, I'm literally sitting in a bombed-out building trying to help people who mostly hate me. Isn't that proof enough?" Her expression didn't change. She simply waited, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the plate between them. The laugh died in Michael's throat. This wasn't a metaphor. This wasn't a therapy exercise or some cultural test he hadn't been briefed on. She wanted evidence. Real, tangible proof that humans possess the capacity to care about anything beyond their own interests. The plate sat there, cooling slowly. "You're serious?" he said. "I am always serious." Her luminescent marks pulsed once, a ripple of faint blue light. Words are cheap. Humans speak constantly of peace, of healing, of unity. I have heard these words before. They preceded bombardments. Michael felt something shift in his chest, that old familiar weight he carried. The weight of Sarah's photo in his pocket. The weight of peace treaties signed over mass graves. The weight of trying to believe that empathy meant something when the universe kept presenting evidence to the contrary. What exactly would constitute proof? He asked. She stood, moving with that unsettling Ealer grace that made them look like they were perpetually underwater. At the doorway she paused, glancing back. "That is your problem to solve, Dr. Grant. Not mine." Then she was gone, leaving only the plate and its cooling contents. Michael sat alone in the ruined clinic, staring at a meal he hadn't been invited to eat, presented by a woman whose name he didn't know, as proof of a challenge he didn't understand how to meet. Outside, Varella's sons continued their slow arc across a sky that looked the same from both sides of a war nobody had really won. He pulled out his datapad and started a new file. Patient 48. Arrived 0847. Delivered impossible challenge. Departed 0851. Name unknown. Prognosis unclear. Then he added one more line. Note to self. She didn't want conversation. She wanted evidence. Michael stayed at the clinic until the sun set, which on Varela meant the sky turned from amber to deep violet in about 17 minutes. He'd timed it once, back when measuring things felt like control. The walk back to his quarters took him through what everyone euphemistically called the transition zone, where human prefabs neighbored Alere crystalline structures in uncomfortable proximity. Nobody made eye contact. People just moved past each other like water around stones, leaving empty space where connection might have been. His room was small. One bed, one desk, one window that looked out on nothing worth seeing. But it was his, and after months of sleeping in evacuation centers, that counted for something. He sat on the bed and pulled Sarah's photo from his pocket, the physical kind, printed on actual paper because some memories you needed to hold. She smiled at him from 3 years ago, back when they'd both believed peace negotiations meant something, back when he'd convinced her that talking to the Alere command about surrender terms was worth the risk. The explosion had been instant. The Alere claimed it was a rogue faction. The humans blamed sabotage. Sarah had simply been erased, along with 14 other mediators and the illusion that words could stop what momentum had started. "I'm trying again," he told her photo. Probably stupid. Definitely stupid. But what else am I supposed to do? The paper didn't answer. It never did. Sleep came in fragments. When he returned to the clinic at dawn, she was already there. Same seat. Same plate. Same expression of patient evaluation. The food was fresh this time, still steaming. "You came back," Michael said, trying for casual and landing somewhere near surprised. "You are still here," she replied. "That is something. Not much, but something." He sat across from her, the plate a border between them. Up close, he could see details he'd missed yesterday. Scars, faint but numerous, tracking across her hands. A slight asymmetry to her face, like an injury once healed. And that mark on her right forearm, partially hidden by her sleeve, that seemed to glow with its own wrong kind of light. "I'm Michael," he offered. "Michael Grant, former negotiator, current optimist, perpetual believer in conversations nobody wants to have." "Narath," she said. Then, as if the name itself was irrelevant. "Former commander, current observer, perpetual skeptic of human sincerity." Former commander. Of what? Her luminescent traces flickered. Things I cannot undo. Michael understood that kind of past. "Want to talk about it?" "Human words are cheap," she said, each word deliberate. "You speak of care, of healing, of peace, beautiful concepts. I watched humans speak these words while preparing orbital strikes. I heard humans promise safety while deploying weapons that do not stop burning." She pulled back her sleeve. The wound ran from her wrist to her elbow, a scar that pulsed with sickly yellow light. Wrong light. The kind that came from experimental weapons nobody was supposed to use, but everybody did anyway. Michael recognized it. From medical briefings he wished he didn't remember. Thermoreactive phosphor rounds. They didn't just damage tissue. They bonded with it, creating permanent markers of violence that glowed whenever the victim's stress levels elevated. 3 years, Narath said. It has not healed. It will not heal. Every time I remember what humans are capable of, it brightens. A convenient reminder that your species excels at creating pain that lasts. Michael reached out instinctively, then stopped. "I could help treat that. There are protocols, therapies that might—" "No." The word hit like a door slamming. She pulled her sleeve down, covering the evidence. "You want to prove humans care? Do not offer me treatments you cannot guarantee. Do not promise healing you cannot provide. Do not speak words that sound like every lie I have already heard." Listen, she stood to leave, but Michael spoke before she reached the door. Then what? What counts as proof? Narath turned, and for just a moment, something that might have been hope flickered across her face before the skepticism returned. Show me. Do not tell me. Humans claim to care even for those who hate them. Demonstrate this, consistently, without audience, without reward. She left. The plate remained, cooling, untouched. Michael sat alone with the food and the challenge and the growing realization that she wasn't testing whether humans could feel. She was testing whether their feelings meant anything at all when the cost of caring rose higher than convenience allowed. He looked at the wound on his own hand, the small scar from a piece of shrapnel on the day Sarah died. His didn't glow. His just reminded him, quietly, that some pain you carry because you chose to be somewhere dangerous. Some pain you carry because you loved someone. Some pain you carry because you failed them. She carried wounds that glowed in the dark. We both did. The Peace Council summons arrived at noon, delivered by a human liaison who looked apologetic and determined in equal measure. They're concerned, she said, which was diplomatic code for alarmed. About your interactions with the Ealer woman, Narath. So she has a file, Michael said. She has several files. Commander Narath. Tactical officer during the siege of Kelmar Station. Responsible for 378 human casualties. The liaison paused. Also responsible for evacuating 2,000 Elir civilians when her own command ordered her to abandon them. She's complicated. Everyone is, Michael replied. The council met in what used to be the city's administrative center, now retrofitted with human and Elir architecture in a forced marriage of design philosophies that satisfied nobody. 7 members sat in a semicircle, 4 human, 3 Elir, all looking at Michael with varying degrees of concern. Counselor Yang spoke first. Dr. Grant, your work has been valuable. No one questions your commitment, but this particular patient presents risks we cannot ignore. Risks like healing, like bridge building, like actually attempting what the treaty claims we're all here to do. An Elir counselor, her luminescent marks pulsing slowly, leaned forward. Narath was not released. She escaped detention. She killed 2 guards in the process. She is dangerous. She's traumatized, Michael countered. There's a difference. Is there? Yang's expression hardened. We've built a fragile peace here, Doctor. One incident, one miscalculation, and this entire colony collapses into violence. We're asking you to end your sessions with her, for everyone's safety. Michael stood. The room felt smaller suddenly, the weight of collective fear pressing inward. If I cannot reach one person, he said slowly, how exactly am I supposed to help millions? If I give up the moment it gets complicated, what message does that send about human commitment to actual peace? It sends the message that we're practical, Yang replied, that we understand acceptable losses. She's not a loss, she's a person. The meeting ended poorly. Meetings like that always did. Michael walked back to the clinic through afternoon heat that made the air shimmer. Halfway there he found patient 47, the Elir who'd run yesterday, collapsed against a wall. Dehydration most likely. This region of Virella was unforgiving. He approached slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. The Elir's eyes tracked him with pure fear. Just water, Michael said softly. That's all. I'm not going to hurt you. The Elir didn't run, maybe couldn't run. Michael knelt, offered his canteen, waited. Eventually, trembling hands accepted it. From across the street, Narath watched. He hadn't seen her arrive, but she stood in shadow, observing, taking notes in that careful way of hers, measuring his actions against her challenge. When the Elir soldier had drunk his fill and shakily stood, Michael watched him go without comment. Then he saw the child, small, maybe 6 years old if Michael understood Elir age markers correctly. The girl sat in the rubble near what might have been a playground once, crying with the particular hopelessness that came from being lost and alone. Michael crossed to her, slowly. She watched him with huge eyes, luminescent traces flickering erratically with distress. He had food in his pack, standard rations, nothing special. He set them down beside her, backed away to a non-threatening distance. "It's okay," he said, knowing she probably didn't understand the words, hoping she understood the tone. "You're safe." Narath materialized beside him like smoke gaining form. He jumped slightly, which seemed to amuse her. First expression beyond skepticism he'd seen on her face. "Why?" she asked. "Why what? Why give food to a child who will grow to hate you? Why give water to a soldier who would kill you if he could? Why persist in caring for those who offer nothing in return?" Michael looked at her directly. "Because hunger doesn't choose sides. Neither does caring. And if I only help people who like me, I'm not actually helping. I'm just performing kindness for an audience." "And when there is no audience?" "Then there's still the child, still the thirst, still the fact that I have food and someone else doesn't. The math doesn't change based on who's watching." Narath said nothing, but her luminescent marks pulsed in a pattern he didn't recognize. Not quite approval, maybe consideration. She left without taking the plate she'd brought that morning. For the first time, she left it where he might actually eat from it. That evening, as Varela's sun set in their absurdly brief twilight, Michael returned to find his room had been searched. Nothing taken, but everything moved slightly. Message received. Someone wanted him to know they were watching, that his choices had consequences, that bucking the council's gentle suggestion would not go unnoticed. He lay awake that night, thinking about acceptable losses, about children crying in rubble, about wounds that glowed in darkness, about Sarah, who died believing that peace was possible if someone just tried hard enough. Maybe she'd been naive. Maybe they both had been. But what was the alternative? Stop trying because it was difficult? Give up the moment someone told you the math didn't work out? 3 days later, Narath vanished. Rumors spread through the colony like fire through dry grass. The Elir refugee camp outside the city claimed she'd been seen. Then, that she'd been taken. Human extremists bragging in bars about teaching aliens a lesson. Elir extremists whispering about justice finally served. Michael found the plate on his desk, untouched, with a message scratched into its surface in Elir script he taught himself to read. Still waiting for evidence. She was gone. The challenge remained. And somewhere out in Varela's unforgiving landscape, a woman who carried glowing scars and impossible questions was either dead or dying, and Michael Grant had no idea how to prove anything to someone who wasn't there to witness it. Michael left at dawn without telling anyone where he was going. The kind of decision that felt right precisely because it was probably stupid. The refugee camp sat 3 kilometers outside the colony proper, where Elir, who refused integration, had built a community from salvage and stubbornness. Official policy was to leave them alone. Unofficial policy was to pretend they didn't exist until they became a problem. He approached on foot, hands visible, medical bag clearly marked. The first checkpoint came at 2 kilometers. Elir sentries materialized from the ruins, weapons probably aimed at him though he couldn't see them. "I'm looking for someone," he called out. "Narath, former commander, she may be injured." Silence, then movement. They came at him fast. 4 Elir, young, angry, with the kind of grief that fermented into rage. Michael went down hard, his medical bag scattering its contents across cracked pavement. A knee in his back, hands pulling his arms behind him, voices speaking rapid Elir he couldn't follow. Then another voice cut through, sharp as breaking glass. "Stop!" The pressure on his back released. Michael rolled over, gasping to see Narath standing over her own people like a question mark they hadn't expected to face. "He is mine," she said. Then, with what might have been dark humor, "My project." The young Elir looked between her and Michael, confusion evident. One spoke rapidly in their language. Narath replied in the same tongue, her tone allowing no argument. Eventually, reluctantly, they retreated. She helped him up. Her hand was cooler than human skin and stronger than he'd expected. "Your project?" Michael asked, dusting himself off. "Would you prefer prisoner? Test subject? Curiosity I have not yet decided to kill?" "Project works. Project is fine." She led him deeper into the camp, through structures that bent Illyr architecture to make use of human rubble. Elegant solutions born from necessity. They reached what might have been her quarters, a space carved from a half-collapsed building that still had 3 walls and most of a ceiling. "You should not have come here," she said, but without heat. "Humans who wander into refugee camps tend to leave in pieces." "Yeah, I got that impression, but I heard rumors that you were missing, or taken, or worse. You came to rescue me?" Something that might have been amusement flickered across her face. "From whom exactly? I am where I choose to be. The extremists, the violence, You thought I was a victim needing salvation." She sat on what passed for furniture, a carved stone that served as bench. "I commanded armies, Dr. Grant. I survived your species' worst weapons. I am not some delicate thing requiring your protection." Michael sat across from her, wincing at his bruised ribs. "Fair point. But you disappeared. After what we talked about. After the challenge. I thought maybe something had happened." "Something did happen." Her voice dropped lower. "I watched you give water to a soldier who fears you, food to a child who will be taught to hate you. I watched you persist in small kindnesses with no witnesses, no rewards, no guarantee of success, and I did not know what to do with that information. So you came here. I came here to remember who I am, what I did." She pulled back her sleeve again, showing the glowing wound. "I commanded the bombardment of Kelmar Station. 378 humans died. I gave that order. I watched it executed. And afterward, I stood in the command center and wept because I had become exactly what I fought against." The confession hung between them like smoke. "You also evacuated 2,000 civilians," Michael said quietly. "Your own command wanted them left behind. You disobeyed." "Who told you that?" "The Council. Before they told me to stop seeing you. Apparently, you are complicated." "Complicated?" She tested the word. "Is that what humans call someone who kills and saves in equal measure?" "We call that human. Well, you know what I mean. Sentient. Capable of choice. Flawed." Michael leaned forward. "That remorse you feel, that's proof you care, that you feel, that the choices cost you something. And does your species feel remorse? For the experimental weapons that leave wounds glowing in the dark? For the orbital strikes? For the countless atrocities committed in the name of security? Some do. I do. My wife died trying to negotiate peace. She believed that empathy could bridge any gap if we just tried hard enough. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe we're all just stumbling around in the dark, pretending our good intentions matter more than our body counts." Narath studied him with those dark eyes. "Your wife, she died in the negotiations." "Yes. And yet you persist in caring for those who killed her, in seeking peace with those who showed none. What else is there? Hate? Revenge? I tried that. It doesn't bring her back. It just makes the wound deeper. Grief taught me to see pain," she said slowly, as if translating her thoughts into words that might bridge species. "Love taught me to touch it." They sat in silence after that. Outside, Varella's suns climbed higher, turning the ruins into geometric patterns of light and shadow. Eventually, Narath stood. "I will return to your clinic, to continue the challenge, to watch your evidence accumulate or fail." She paused at the entrance. "But there is one condition." "What?" "You must eat from the plate, first. Before I will." Michael blinked. "Why?" "Because trust," she said, "is not built on words, it is built on shared risk. If you want me to believe humans care, prove you are willing to sit at a table with someone who has every reason to poison you." Then she was gone, leaving Michael alone in her makeshift quarters, surrounded by the artifacts of a life built from war's leftovers, wondering what exactly he'd agreed to and whether he'd just made the breakthrough or signed his own death warrant. We both carried the weight of bullets we didn't fire, he thought, and those we did. 3 weeks passed, like water finding its level. Narath returned to the clinic, not every day but regularly. She'd arrive with her plate, set it between them, and watch. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they sat in silence while Michael worked on other patients. She observed everything: how he cleaned wounds, how he spoke to those who cursed him, how he rationed supplies so the ones who came last still received care. Other Ilir began to follow her lead, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. A veteran with nerve damage, a child with chronic infections, an elder whose family had died in the bombardments. One by one, they came to see if the human doctor's kindness was performance or pattern. The change rippled outward. Human patients who'd spat at him began to nod instead. The council stopped sending warning memos. The colony began to feel less like an armed standoff and more like a neighborhood where people just happened to have bad history. Then the Peace Council announced the Unity Dinner. Official celebration. Symbolic gesture. Every human and Ilir in the colony invited to share a meal in the reconstructed Central Plaza. Speeches would be made. Treaties would be honored in public. Hope would be performed for the cameras that recorded everything for history's benefit. Michael thought it was asking for trouble, but Narath surprised him. "I will attend," she said, sitting in her usual chair while he redressed an Ilir soldier's plasma burn. "Your species excels at empty gestures. I am curious if this one will be different. You really know how to make a guy feel special." "I do not need to make you feel special. I need to observe whether your species can maintain caring beyond convenient moments." The night of the dinner, Virella's plaza glowed with careful lighting that favored neither human nor Ilir aesthetics. Tables had been arranged in mixed seating. Food represented both cultures, prepared by joint cooking teams. Music played, some compromise between Earth's harmonies and Ilir's tonal patterns. Michael wore his only clean jacket. Narath wore her uniform, patched and worn, with no apologies for its history. She sat at his table, and once again the plate appeared between them. This time filled with the Unity Dinner's shared feast. She watched him. He watched her watching him. The whole thing felt like a game of chicken played with philosophical implications. "You eat first," she said. "We've been through this. I'm not afraid you'll poison me." "Then prove it." Michael took a piece of bread from the plate. Ate it. The hall watched with varying degrees of interest and concern. He took another piece, offered it to her. Narath looked at the bread, at him, at the bread again. Then, before she could respond, a small figure approached their table. A human boy, maybe 8 years old, clothes too large, the kind that got donated to orphans, eyes that had seen too much for his age. Michael recognized him from the medical center. Parents killed in a Ilir raid, now living in the youth shelter near the colony's edge. The boy carried his own plate. He stopped beside Narath, looked up at her with that fearless curiosity children somehow maintain even after everything, and placed a piece of bread on her plate. "My father used to say, peace begins when someone shares what they have," the boy said. His voice was small but clear. "He died before he could share enough, but I can try." The hall went silent. Not planned silence, not performative quiet. Just the natural hush that happens when something true cuts through artifice. Narath looked at the child, at the bread, at Michael. Her luminescent marks pulsed in patterns that might have been distress or wonder or something between. She picked up the bread, held it. Everyone watched. Michael held his breath without meaning to. She ate, slowly, deliberately, tears tracking down her face in a way that made clear she hadn't cried publicly in years, maybe decades. The hall erupted in applause, not the planned kind, the spontaneous kind that comes from witnessing something shift. Hope, fragile and embarrassing and desperately needed, filled the space. Michael reached across the table, Narath took his hand. The boy beamed. Then the world exploded. The blast came from the plaza's eastern edge. Secondary explosions followed. Extremists, later reports would confirm. Human extremists who saw peace as betrayal. They'd planted charges in the reconstruction supports, timed them for maximum impact. Michael's ears rang. Smoke and screaming filled the air. He saw Narath thrown backward, saw tables collapse, saw the boy who'd offered bread lying too still under debris. Training took over. Michael pulled Narath upright, checked her for injuries. She was intact, but dazed. Others weren't. He moved toward the casualties, that automatic instinct to heal overriding everything else. More explosions. Structural collapse. Something massive falling from above. Michael saw it, couldn't move fast enough, and felt Narath shove him aside. Heard her grunt of pain. Saw her go down under rubble that should have crushed him. He scrambled to her, pulling away debris with hands that shook. Found her conscious but bleeding. Something had pierced her side. Her luminescent marks flickered erratically. "Why?" he gasped. "Why would you—" "Evidence," she whispered, "is not just words." Medics arrived. Human and Alir, working together in crisis, the way they should have from the start. They lifted Narath onto a stretcher. Michael tried to follow, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. Shock settling in. Someone was calling his name. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was her hand, reaching back toward where he'd fallen, her glowing wound pulsing in time with her heartbeat, and the plate between them finally empty because someone had believed enough to share. The boy offered bread. The warrior offered tears. Then the world exploded. And in that explosion, something broke that had needed breaking. The illusion that peace could exist without cost. The pretense that caring was easy when convenient. Real peace, Michael understood as consciousness left him, was built on moments when you protected someone, even though it hurt. When you ate from a stranger's plate, despite fear. When a child shared bread with a soldier who'd killed his parents' generation. "Prove you care too," he murmured to no one. To everyone, to Narath, to a universe that kept demanding evidence. Then the darkness was total. 3 days Michael lay in the darkness between living and dying. Narath sat beside him for all of them. The infirmary smelled of antiseptic and fear. Human medical technology kept Michael's body technically alive, but the scans showed trauma deeper than tissue. Shattered ribs, collapsed lung, internal bleeding they'd controlled but couldn't fully repair. His brain activity remained normal, but consciousness stayed distant, like he was deciding whether coming back was worth the effort. Narath knew that calculation. She'd made it herself once. The human doctors came and went. They'd stabilized her own injuries easily enough. Alir physiology healed faster than human, which seemed unfair given humans were the ones usually doing the damaging. But the wound in her side had closed. The concussion had faded. She could leave any time she wanted. She stayed. On the second day, Alir council guards arrived. 3 of them, armed, official. The ranking officer spoke in their shared language, words that carried weight of law. "Commander Narath, you are summoned to answer for violations of asylum terms and unauthorized contact with hostile elements. You will come with us immediately." She didn't move from Michael's bedside. "I am occupied." "This is not a request. You fled detention. You killed guards. You violated every term of your conditional freedom. The council has been patient, but patience has limits." "Then limit it further. I am not leaving." The guards moved forward. Narath stood, putting herself between them and Michael's unconscious form. A human doctor protested. Someone called security. The situation escalated with the practiced ease of conflicts that had been rehearsed too many times. Then Michael's vitals dropped. Alarms screamed. Doctors rushed in. Technology that moments ago had maintained stable crisis suddenly registered cascade failure. The human physician shouted commands Narath couldn't follow, medical terms in a language she'd learned to understand but not to process under pressure. "We're losing him," someone said, too loud, too final. The physician looked at Narath, helpless. "There's nothing more we can do. His body is just shutting down. I'm sorry." Narath looked at Michael. At this human who'd fed strangers and shared plates with enemies, and gotten himself nearly killed protecting people who'd spent years trying to kill him. This ridiculous, stubborn, impossibly compassionate fool who'd asked her to prove that Elir could care as deeply as they claimed humans could not. She'd fled detention by killing 2 guards. That was true. What the council hadn't included in their reports was that those guards had been executing prisoners. That she'd escaped not to save herself, but to expose an extermination program running parallel to official peace treaties. That her unauthorized contact had been gathering evidence of war crimes both sides pretended didn't exist. She'd seen humans at their worst, watched them deploy weapons that violated every convention, witnessed them justify atrocities with the same calm efficiency the Elir used. But she'd also seen this one human sit in ruins, offering care to anyone who asked. Watched him persist through rejection, observed him choose kindness with mathematical consistency that defied every cynical assumption she'd brought to his clinic. He'd asked her to prove that Elir cared. She'd demanded he prove humans did. They'd both been wrong. The question wasn't whether either species could feel. The question was whether feeling meant anything when the cost rose higher than convenience. Narath placed her hand on Michael's chest, over his heart. The human doctor started to protest, then saw her expression and stepped back. "What are you doing?" the Elir guard demanded. "Something forbidden," she replied. The Elir capacity for vital energy transfer was ancient, deeply private, never discussed with other species. It allowed them to literally pour their life force into another being, healing injuries through shared existence. But it only worked between Elir. Attempting it across species was not just prohibited, it was believed impossible. Narath didn't care about possible. She cared about this human dying because he'd chosen to protect her. She focused, felt the energy that sustained her own life beginning to move. It hurt. More than the experimental weapon that had scarred her arm. More than the guilt of commanding massacres. More than every wound she'd carried. The luminescence in her marks flared, bright enough that humans in the room shielded their eyes. Energy flowed from her into Michael, bridging a gap biology said couldn't be bridged. His vitals stabilized, then improved. His chest rose with deeper breaths. The process lasted minutes. Hours. Narath couldn't tell. Time became flexible when you were literally dying by choice. When she finally released him, she collapsed. The guards caught her, but gently now. Even they understood what they'd witnessed. What it cost. "Why?" the ranking officer whispered. "He is human. He is nothing to our people. Why sacrifice yourself?" Narath looked at Michael, watching his eyes move beneath closed lids. Dreaming, living, continuing because she'd chosen that he should. "He asked me to prove Elir care," she said, voice barely above breath. "He asked me to demonstrate that our feelings were as real as his, that our capacity for compassion matched our capacity for violence. You want evidence? There it is. Bleeding and unconscious, but breathing." She smiled. Exhausted. Satisfied. Utterly spent. "If compassion is crime," she added, "then humanity contaminated more than they expected. They taught me to give a damn. Consider me infected." The guards looked at each other, at her, at Michael, at the impossible thing that had just occurred. Finally, the officer spoke. "The council will hear of this. All of it. What happens next is above our authority." "Then take me," Narath said. "Let them judge, but he lives. That is what matters. He proved his species cares through pattern and persistence. I prove mine through single impossible choice. We are even now." They carried her out. She didn't resist, didn't need to. The evidence was complete, the challenge met. The question answered in terms neither species could deny. Behind her, Michael's heartbeat grew stronger. His hand moved, reached toward empty air where she'd been sitting, found only the plate she'd left, the same plate from their first meeting. The challenge. The beginning. On its surface, scratched in Elier script, "You proved it. Now I have too." She'd saved him, broken laws to do it, condemned herself to judgment, and for the first time since the war began, Narath felt entirely at peace with her choices. Some things were worth the cost. Some people deserved the sacrifice, and sometimes proving you care required more than words or patterns or patient accumulation of evidence. Sometimes it required everything. She'd given it, freely, without hesitation, because that's what caring meant when it mattered. The guards took her into custody. The council would convene. Judgment would be passed. But in that infirmary, a human breathed because an Elier chose his life over her own freedom. That was evidence no skeptic could deny. That was proof that transcended species. That was the moment everything changed. One impossible choice, one forbidden act, one transfer of life that shouldn't have worked but did. Evidence isn't loud. It's consistent, except when it's not. Except when it's a single moment of sacrifice that rewrites every assumption. Michael dreamed of plates and bread and warriors who wept. He dreamed of kindness that cost everything. He dreamed of peace built on impossible choices. And somewhere in those dreams he understood. She'd won the challenge they'd both been playing. Not through patience, through fire. Through the kind of caring that burns bridges and breaks laws and says to hell with consequences, this person lives. She'd proved it, finally, definitively. In terms that left no doubt, Elier could care as fiercely as any human, more fiercely, with a completeness that made human empathy look like practice runs. The question was, what came next? Michael woke to silence. Wrong kind of silence. The absence of something silence that makes you know before you open your eyes that the world shifted while you were gone. The infirmary, clean sheets, medical equipment humming. His chest hurt, but he could breathe. That was new. Last thing he remembered was debris falling, Narath shoving him, impact, darkness. He sat up too fast. Pain reminded him that healing wasn't instant. A human nurse rushed over, relief evident. "Dr. Grant, thank God. You've been unconscious for 3 days." "We didn't think?" She stopped, started over. "You're going to be okay. Against all probability, you're going to be fine." "Narath?" The name came out rough. "The Elier woman who was with me. Is she alive? Injured but stable when they took her." "Took her where?" The nurse hesitated. That particular hesitation that meant bad news carefully packaged. "Elier custody. She violated asylum terms. Used some kind of Elier medical technique on you that's apparently forbidden. The council arrested her immediately after." Michael tried to stand. His legs disagreed. The nurse helped him back to the bed, her expression shifting from relief to concern. "You can't go anywhere yet. Your injuries..." "She saved my life." "Yes, and now she's facing charges for it." "The Elier Council is convening a formal tribunal." "It's complicated, Dr. Grant. Apparently what she did was not just illegal, it was considered impossible. Cross-species vital energy transfer. She shouldn't have been able to do it, and definitely shouldn't have attempted it." Michael looked down at his hands. Steady, whole. Alive because someone had chosen that he should be. He'd asked her to prove a liar could care. She'd answered by committing what her species considered a crime. On the bedside table sat the plate. The original plate from that first challenge. Scratched into its surface, message in Elier's script he'd learned to read. "You proved it. Now I have too." He traced the words with one finger. Proof? Evidence? The cost of caring when it mattered most. A knock at the door. Council liaison. Same one who'd delivered the warning weeks ago. She looked exhausted. "Dr. Grant, I'm glad you're awake. We need to talk." Where is she being held? Ilir Detention Facility, awaiting tribunal. She's charged with escape from lawful custody, murder of guards, unauthorized contact with humans, and now illegal use of forbidden techniques. They're calling for exile to a penal colony, possibly execution, for saving my life, for breaking their laws. Look, I know this is terrible, but you need to understand something. The human extremists who bombed the dinner, they're part of a larger network. Anti-integration forces on both sides working to destabilize the peace. If we push too hard on Narath's case, we risk making her a martyr, risk giving extremists exactly the conflict they want. Michael absorbed this. The calculus of acceptable losses. The math that said one person wasn't worth jeopardizing thousands. He'd heard it before. From Yang, from the council, from everyone who thought practically about impractical things like caring. What happens if I testify at her tribunal? He asked. Testify? Dr. Grant, humans don't participate in Ilir legal proceedings. It's not permitted. And even if it were, what would you say? That she should be pardoned for crimes she actually committed? I'd say that she proved something both our species needed proven, that caring isn't weakness, that choosing someone else's life over your own freedom is the strongest thing anyone can do, that if we punish that, we're telling both species that compassion is a liability. The liaison side. Noble, impractical, and likely to make things worse. The Ilir Council is already divided. Half want her executed as an example, half want her quietly disappeared. You showing up might force them to take a harder line to save face. So what? I just do nothing? Let her face judgment alone after she literally bled herself to save me? You do what humans do best. You survive. You continue your work. You honor her sacrifice by making it mean something long-term. The liaison left. Michael sat alone with the plate and the message and the growing realization that she was right. Practically right, safely right, sensibly right. He hated it. That night, lying in the infirmary's comfortable emptiness, Michael pulled Sarah's photo from his belongings. 3 years gone. She smiled at him from before everything, when peace had seemed achievable through just trying hard enough. She saved me, he told the photo. Told Sarah, told himself. She broke laws and condemned herself to save someone who'd spent weeks challenging her to feel anything. And now I'm supposed to accept that as just how things work? That sacrifice means nothing if it's inconvenient? Sarah's photo didn't answer, but he could imagine what she'd say. Something about picking battles, about strategic thinking, about how caring meant thinking long-term, not just reacting to immediate crisis. He could also imagine what she'd say about letting someone face death alone after they'd chosen your life over theirs. Morning came. Michael tried to walk, managed 3 steps before his body reminded him that miraculous healing only went so far. He collapsed back into bed, frustrated. 2 small figures appeared in the doorway. The human orphan boy who'd offered bread at the dinner, and an Ilir girl, maybe similar age, her luminescent marks flickering with shy determination. They approached Michael's bed together. The boy spoke first. We heard what happened, that the Ilir lady saved you, that she's in trouble for it. The Ilir girl continued, her standard halting but clear. Our parents killed each other in war. We are supposed to hate, but we do not. We want to help. Michael looked at these children, human and Ilir, standing together, offering help. They'd lost everything to the same violence that had killed Sarah and scarred Narath, and still they chose connection over hatred. Still they believed caring mattered more than convenient survival. Something shifted in his chest. Not physical. Deeper than that. You want to help? He asked. They nodded. Then help me get to that tribunal. I can't walk well yet. My body's not cooperating, but I need to be there. I need to testify. They will not let you, the Ilir girl said. Humans not permitted in Ilir court. Michael smiled, felt it reach his eyes for the first time since waking. Then I guess I'll be the first. She asked me to prove humans care. Now I have to prove it to an entire species. No pressure, right? The children looked at each other. Some silent communication passed between them. Then they nodded. "We help," they said together. That's how Michael Grant, still healing from injuries that should have killed him, began planning to do something no human had attempted in decades. He'd testify at an Elir tribunal. He'd stand before a species that had every reason to hate him and explain why one woman's choice to save an enemy deserved recognition, not punishment. He'd prove that humans care, that gratitude was real, that sacrifice demanded honor regardless of which side committed it. Sarah would have called it reckless. She'd also have helped him pack. Nareth had asked a simple question weeks ago: prove that humans care. He'd spent weeks demonstrating patterns. Now it was time for the single impossible gesture. The moment that would either bridge two species or destroy what fragile peace remained. She'd risked everything for him. Time to return the favor. The plate sat beside his bed. Evidence, challenge, promise. He traced its scratched message one more time. "You proved it. Now I have too." Not yet, he thought, but soon. "I'll prove it to everyone who needs to see. I'll testify. I'll stand before your people and make them understand that what you did wasn't crime. It was revolution. The kind that changes everything through single impossible choice." She asked me to prove humans care. Now I had to prove it to an entire species. Ready or not, broken or whole, one chance to honor a sacrifice that shouldn't have been necessary but absolutely was. One testimony, one truth, one chance to show that caring costs everything and is worth it anyway. The Elir Tribunal building stood like a declaration, all crystalline angles and light refraction, built from materials that seemed to grow rather than be assembled. It dominated the colony's neutral zone, reminder that some structures predated the peace and would likely outlast it. Michael arrived supported by the two children. His body still protested movement, but determination makes a decent substitute for full healing. What he hadn't expected was everyone else. They gathered in the plaza outside the tribunal. Humans and Elir both. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Every patient he'd treated. Every person who'd witnessed his daily routine of small kindnesses. They came carrying signs in both languages, wearing colors of both cultures, standing together in numbers that made officials nervous. The Elir veteran whose nerve damage Michael had treated for months stepped forward. "We stand with you, Dr. Grant. What she did was not crime. It was answer to question we all needed answered." A human woman, scarred from Elir attacks, joined him. "You helped my son when everyone else said to let him die. Said he wasn't worth the resources. You proved them wrong. We're here to prove something too." Michael felt his throat tighten. "You don't have to do this. The council won't like it. There could be consequences." Consequences. The word rippled through the crowd, spoken in multiple languages, turning into something between laugh and battle cry. We live with consequences every day. Might as well make them mean something. The tribunal guards tried to block entrance. "Humans not permitted inside Elir judicial proceedings. This is law." Michael stepped forward, still shaky but determined. "Then change the law, or enforce it. But I'm going in. You'll have to physically remove me, and I'd prefer to do this without violence since that seems counterproductive to everything we're trying to prove." The guards looked at each other, at the crowd, at Michael, broken but standing. One guard spoke rapidly into a communication device. Minutes passed. Finally, the doors opened. "The council permits testimony, but only you, Dr. Grant. The others remain outside." "Then they'll hear me from there," Michael said. "I'm not quiet." The tribunal chamber was smaller than he expected. Circular. 7 Elir counselors seated in traditional positions. Nareth stood in the center, restrained but unbroken. When she saw Michael, something flickered across her face. Surprise? Concern. Something that might have been pride. The head counselor spoke, voice resonating through translation systems. "Human, you should not be here. This is Elir law, addressing Elir crimes. With respect, counselor, this concerns me directly. She saved my life using forbidden techniques. I'm the evidence. You can't judge the crime without hearing from the person most affected. Silence. Consideration. Finally, speak then. But understand that human testimony carries no legal weight in Elir proceedings. Michael stepped forward, every movement careful. I'm not here to argue law. I'm here to talk about evidence. He had no prepared speech, no diplomatic phrasing, just truth presented in the same direct way he'd given care for months. Commander Narath came to my clinic weeks ago with a challenge. Prove that humans care. Actually prove it, with actions, not words. I spent weeks trying. I fed people who hated me. I gave water to soldiers who would have killed me. I treated wounds inflicted by both sides. I persisted through rejection because she asked for pattern, not performance. He pulled up his sleeve, showed the scars from debris. These came from protecting her during an attack by human extremists. I didn't think about it. Didn't calculate the political implications. She was there, danger was coming, I moved. That's what caring looks like when it's real. But she did something harder. She broke your laws. She used forbidden techniques. She literally bled herself to save someone from a species that scarred her permanently with experimental weapons. Someone whose people killed hundreds of hers. She gave me life knowing it would cost her freedom. Possibly her own life. Michael looked at Narath, at the counselors, at guards watching from doorways. I didn't bring arguments. I brought wounds, healed. I brought evidence of what happens when someone cares enough to act despite cost. Both species needed proof that the other could feel. She provided it. Definitive, undeniable proof that Elir can care as deeply, as fiercely, as completely as any human. Outside, the crowd had grown. Their voices filtered through walls. Human and Elir together, chanting something that might have been support or demand or prayer. One counselor leaned forward. What you describe is admirable, but it does not change that laws were broken, that forbidden techniques were used, that she murdered guards and fled custody. Those guards were executing prisoners. Narath spoke for the first time. I have evidence, recordings, data streams showing systematic elimination of political dissidents under cover of lawful detention. I fled not to escape justice, but to preserve evidence of genocide disguised as peacekeeping. The chamber erupted. Counselors argued among themselves. Guards moved uncertainly. Michael kept talking, voice raised above the chaos. You want to punish her for caring, for choosing life over law? Then punish every person outside who learned that lesson from watching us. Punish the children who offered bread to strangers. Punish everyone who decided that maybe, just maybe, our capacity to feel matters more than our capacity to follow rules that protect atrocity. An elderly Elir counselor, silent until now, raised her hand. The chamber quieted. I lost 3 children to human bombardments. I have every reason to hate, to demand maximum punishment for any Elir who aids humans. But I have watched this human work. I have seen him treat those who curse him. I have witnessed pattern and persistence. If we punish Commander Narath for answering his challenge with equally fierce caring, what does that say about us? Another counselor objected. It says we value law over emotion, that we understand sacrifice without reward. No, the elderly counselor said. It says we fear caring more than we fear dying, that we would rather maintain comfortable hatred than risk uncomfortable love. Michael felt his legs giving way. The children appeared, supporting him. The human boy and Elir girl together, holding up the adult who'd believed they could stand together. She asked me to prove humans care, Michael said, voice barely above a whisper but somehow carrying. I asked her to prove Elir do. We both answered. The question is whether you recognize the answer when it costs something, whether you honor sacrifice or punish it because it's inconvenient. The head counselor looked at Narath. at Michael, at the children supporting him, at guards uncertain of their purpose, at fellow counselors divided between law and recognition. "We will deliberate," the head counselor said finally. "All parties will await decision outside. This tribunal is recessed." Michael allowed himself to be led out. The crowd received him like a returning soldier. Humans and Elir both. They'd heard through walls, through translation, through the universal language of people deciding that caring mattered more than comfort. Narath remained inside, but her eyes followed him. In that look, Michael saw everything they'd built. The challenge, the pattern, the sacrifice, the proof that transcended species and law and every comfortable assumption about who could care for whom. Outside, waiting for judgment, Michael sat surrounded by evidence. The veteran he'd treated, the children he'd fed, the Elir who'd learned to trust, the humans who'd learned to care beyond convenience. One testimony, one truth, one chance to show that caring costs everything and is worth it anyway. Now they waited to see if the cost would be honored or punished, if sacrifice would be recognized or destroyed, if evidence accumulated through patience and delivered through impossible choice would matter more than law and fear and comfortable hatred. The children held his hands, human and Elir, standing together, waiting together, hoping together that the adults would prove as brave as they had been. The sun set. The crowd remained. And inside, 7 Elir counselors faced a choice that would define whether peace was possible or just another word for managed violence. Michael waited, prayed to gods he wasn't sure he believed in, and held tight to the hands of children who'd already figured out what the adults were still learning, that caring doesn't calculate. It just acts. Costs be damned. 3 hours passed, then 4. Virella's twin suns set and rose again, compressed night turning to dawn while the crowd refused to disperse. Michael dozed against a wall, children keeping watch, community keeping vigil. When the tribunal doors finally opened, silence fell like a physical weight. The head counselor emerged, expression unreadable in that way Elir had perfected. Narath walked behind, still restrained, luminescent marks, pulsing steady, but dim. The counselor's voice carried across the plaza without amplification, translated simultaneously into standard. "The tribunal has reached decision regarding Commander Narath." Michael stood, supported by too many hands to count. His body protested. His heart hammered. This was it, the moment that would determine whether sacrifice meant anything at all. Commander Narath has been found guilty of escape from lawful custody, use of forbidden techniques, and unauthorized cross-species contact. These crimes carry severe penalty. After deliberation, this tribunal sentences her to exile. She will be transferred to Penal Colony Designation 7, there to serve remainder of natural life without possibility of return. The words hit like physical blows. Exile, life sentence, for saving a life, for caring when it cost everything. Michael stepped forward, legs shaking. No, that's not justice. That's punishment for compassion. If you do this, you tell every person here that caring is crime, that choosing life over law makes you criminal. Is that really the message you want to send? "The decision is final," the counselor said. Not unkindly, but with the weight of law behind it. "Commander Narath broke fundamental prohibitions. There must be consequences." "Then let me share them." Michael heard his voice say it before his brain approved the plan. "Human Elir shared custody. I take responsibility for her. She serves her sentence under my supervision, working alongside me in the clinic, serving the community she saved me to continue serving." The counselor's expression shifted. Surprise? Consideration. "This is unprecedented. We have no framework for such arrangement." "Good, make one. Create precedent. Show that laws can adapt when they meet situations that matter, or prove that Elir jurisprudence is exactly what Narath accused it of being, rigid, afraid, and unable to recognize transformation when it occurs." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, through the counselors, through guards who'd never seen a human challenge Elir law so directly. Then something remarkable happened. The crowd began to kneel, not in submission, in solidarity. Human and Elir together, lowering themselves to the ground in a gesture both cultures recognized as deepest respect. Hundreds of people, former enemies, choosing this moment to demonstrate unity through vulnerability. The veteran Michael had treated, the mother whose son he'd saved, the Elir elder who'd testified, the children who'd helped him walk, all kneeling, all refusing to stand while injustice was rendered in the name of law. They knelt not in defeat but in defiance of every border hate had drawn. They knelt to say that laws serving fear deserved no respect, that justice protecting comfortable hatred was no justice at all. The elderly Elir counselor from yesterday's testimony stepped forward. She moved slowly, age evident in every motion. The crowd parted. Even the other counselors watched with something like reverence. She was eldest among them, survivor of generations of conflict, carrier of scars nobody questioned. She walked to where Michael stood with the kneeling crowd, looked at him, at Narath, at the children still supporting the human who wouldn't stop caring, at the impossible thing this moment had become. Then she did something that made even the other counselors gasp. She knelt too, between Michael and Narath, placed one hand on each of them. Her luminescent marks flared bright enough to illuminate the dawn plaza. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of every loss she'd endured. This war took my children, 3 sons, 2 daughters, all killed in human attacks. I have carried that loss for 20 years. I have every reason to demand maximum punishment for any Elir who aids humans. Every justification for hatred. She looked up at the standing counselors, at guards uncertain whether to intervene. At a moment, crystallizing into choice. But these 2 have shown me grandchildren I never had. Not through blood. Through choosing each other when everything said to choose hate. Through caring when cost was highest. Through proving that loss does not have to poison everything it touches. Tears tracked down her aged face. If we exile Commander Narath for answering the exact challenge we needed answered, we tell every child watching that caring is liability. That sacrifice deserves punishment, that the courage to choose connection over comfortable hatred will be rewarded with isolation. She stood, slowly, with Michael's help and Narath's support. 3 people, 3 generations, 3 positions in an impossible equation. I propose alternative sentence. Commander Narath serves community through reintegration program. Under supervision, yes. But building the peace she bled to protect. Alongside the human she saved. Demonstrating daily that transformation is possible, that caring can be pattern and miracle simultaneously. The head counselor looked shaken. The other counselors argued among themselves in rapid Elir. Finally, this would require unanimous council approval. Such precedent cannot be set lightly. Then vote, the elderly counselor said, but understand what you choose, not just her fate, whether this peace is real or just temporarily suspended violence. Whether we are capable of honoring impossible sacrifice or only comfortable with convenient forgiveness. The counselors withdrew. The crowd waited, still kneeling. Michael felt his legs giving way, but hands held him up. Human hands, Elir hands, children's hands, all supporting him because he'd supported them. Evidence accumulating, pattern manifesting, proof crystallizing. When the counselors returned, the head counselor's expression had shifted. Something softer there now. Something that might have been hope fighting through layers of protective cynicism. The council votes 5-2 in favor of alternative sentencing. Commander Narath will serve community reintegration under joint human-Elir supervision. She will work alongside Dr. Michael Grant in medical capacity. She will be monitored, yes, but she will remain here, building what she sacrificed to protect. The restraints fell away from Narath's wrists. She stood free for the first time in days. Looked at Michael, at the elderly counselor, at hundreds of people still kneeling in solidarity. "I accept this sentence," she said clearly. "Not as punishment, but as honor, as opportunity to prove daily what I proved once through impossible choice. That caring transcends species when we let it. That sacrifice deserves recognition. That transformation is always available to those brave enough to attempt it." She walked to Michael. They faced each other. Two people who'd challenged each other to feel, who'd answered through pattern and miracle, who'd built something neither species thought possible through stubborn refusal to accept that caring had limits. Narath held out her hand. Michael took it. Then, in front of everyone, witnesses to impossible possibility, they embraced. First time, first public acknowledgement, first moment of connection that didn't need words because actions had already said everything necessary. The crowd rose, cheered, cried. Human and Elir together, making noise that echoed off crystalline buildings and prefab structures. Sound of people discovering that peace was possible when individuals cared more about each other than about comfortable hatred. The elderly counselor placed hands on both their heads, blessing in Elir tradition, recognition in human custom, bridge between cultures built through three people brave enough to care despite cost. "You asked her to prove Elir care," she said to Michael. "She asked you to prove humans do. You both answered. Now teach others. Show them daily that what you built through challenge and sacrifice can be replicated. That transformation is not unique achievement, but available pattern." Michael looked at Narath, at the scar on her arm, still glowing but somehow different now, at luminescent marks that pulsed in rhythm that might have been joy or relief, or simply exhaustion that transformation required. "Together?" he asked. "Together," she confirmed. "Building what we bled to prove, daily, consistently, until everyone understands that caring is not weakness, it is revolution, the kind that changes everything through stubborn refusal to accept that hate is inevitable." They walked through the crowd together, receiving touches, acknowledgments, small gestures of gratitude from people who'd witnessed proof that sacrifice mattered, that choice could overcome momentum, that two people caring fiercely enough could shift an entire colony's understanding of what was possible. The tribunal closed behind them. The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly, wanting to hold this moment before reality reasserted itself. But the moment was already transforming into pattern, already becoming daily evidence that peace required consistent caring, not convenient gestures. Michael Grant and Narath, human and Elir, challenger and challenged, saved and savior. Now partners in building what they'd proven possible through impossible choices. The sentence had been rendered, not punishment, recognition, opportunity disguised as consequence, chance to show that what happened through crisis could happen through pattern, that caring costs everything and is worth it anyway. They returned to the clinic together, same space where she'd first challenged him, same desk where she'd placed impossible question. Same world, but different now. Transformed by people brave enough to care when cost was highest, when easier path was comfortable hatred, when every sensible voice said stop. They'd proved it, both species, both individuals. Now came the harder part, maintaining proof through daily choices, building peace through consistent caring, demonstrating that what worked once through miracle could work perpetually through pattern. The real work began, but they began it together. Evidence accumulated, transformation continued, and somewhere in the colony, other people started asking the same question that had started everything. Not prove you care, but how do we care together? That was the revolution. That was the transformation. That was the moment everything changed, because two people refused to accept that caring had limits, that sacrifice deserved punishment, that peace required anything less than impossible courage demonstrated daily. They'd proved it. Now they'd live it. Together. Building the world one plate, one gesture, one impossible choice at a time. 6 months transformed a question into a legacy. The clinic expanded, not just in size but in concept. What began as Michael's solitary effort became a joint human-Elir operation. Narath brought Elir medical techniques that complemented human practices. Together they trained others. Humans learning Elir approaches to trauma. Elir learning human methods of psychological care. Knowledge flowing both directions until the line between our medicine and theirs blurred into just medicine. The plate from that first challenge hung on the wall now, framed, preserved, not as artifact, but as reminder. Visitors asked about it. Michael and Narath told the story, not the sanitized version, the real one, about challenge and doubt and sacrifice and transformation, about two people stubborn enough to care when everything said stop. To the first challenge, read the plaque beneath it. In both languages. Reminder that questions matter as much as answers. That proving you care requires both pattern and impossible choice. That sometimes revolutions begin with someone placing food between you and demanding evidence. Other clinics opened. Other partnerships formed. Human and Elir working together became less remarkable, more expected. Children grew up seeing cooperation as normal. Old wounds still existed, but they healed slowly through consistent choosing of connection over comfortable separation. The colony adopted a phrase that spread through both cultures. Ancient Elir saying that had fallen out of use until Narath revived it. Sitting at a table is the first act of courage. Simple words, profound implications. Recognition that peace required vulnerability. That choosing to share space with former enemies took more bravery than maintaining hostile distance. Restaurants appeared that served both cuisines. Schools taught both languages. Marriages happened. Not many yet, but enough to prove possible. Enough to show that connection could deepen beyond professional cooperation into genuine affection. Michael received letter one afternoon. Physical paper, deliberately old-fashioned, from an Elir widow he'd treated months ago. She'd opened a restaurant. Human Elir fusion. Place where both cultures could eat together without anyone feeling like they'd surrendered identity to access the other. "Come for dinner," she wrote. "Bring Commander Narath. I want to cook for people who showed me that hate was optional, that I could choose differently." He showed the letter to Narath. They sat in the clinic's break room, surrounded by medical equipment and cultural artifacts from both species. She smiled. Rare expression, but growing less rare. Healing happened slowly. Trust accumulated through pattern. She was learning to let defenses crack. He was learning that caring didn't require fixing everything. "She learned from us," Narath said. "That is the point, yes? Not that we proved something once, but that proof became template. Pattern others could replicate. You're getting philosophical in your old age. I am older than you by Elir standards. Wisdom is earned through survival and suffering. I have abundance of both." They developed rhythm. This gentle banter that covered deeper connection, not romantic, something different. Partnership forged through shared trauma and mutual respect. Love that didn't require possession, just presence. Commitment to building together what neither could build alone. That evening they walked through the colony together. Past the tribunal building where sentence had been rendered, past the plaza where extremists had tried to destroy peace with explosives, past ruins slowly being rebuilt into structures that honored both architectural traditions. People greeted them, both species, small acknowledgments that they'd become symbols. Michael hated that part. Being example felt like performance, but Narath understood differently. "Symbols matter," she said. "They give people framework for their own transformation. We do not perform. We simply live visibly. Let others see that what seemed impossible becomes normal through repetition." The restaurant was small, intimate, decorated with art from both cultures, music playing that blended earth harmonies with Elir tonal patterns. The widow met them at the door, luminescent marks glowing warm. "Thank you for coming, for everything. When my husband died, I thought hate was all I had left. You showed me different options existed." The meal lasted hours. Other patrons arrived, mixed groups, families, individuals brave enough to try sitting at tables with former enemies. Conversations happening in multiple languages, laughter crossing species barriers, peace manifesting not as grand gesture, but as people choosing to share food, despite history saying they shouldn't. Near meal's end, the human orphan boy and Elir girl appeared. They'd grown, matured, remained inseparable. They approached the table where Michael and Nereth sat. "We wanted to thank you," the boy said, "for showing us that caring matters more than comfortable hatred, for proving that we could choose differently." The Elir girl continued, "We are starting program. Youth integration. Teaching children what you taught us. That species matters less than choice. That transformation is always available to those brave enough to attempt it." Michael felt his throat tighten. This was it. The real evidence. Not what he and Nereth had proved, but what others did with that proof. How it spread. How it replicated. How single impossible choice became pattern that transformed entire community. They left the restaurant as Varella's suns set in their perpetual hurry, walked back through colony that felt different now, less like armed standoff, more like neighborhood where people just happen to have complicated history. "It is not finished," Nereth said. "The work, there are still extremists, still those who profit from division, still those who choose comfortable hatred over difficult caring." "No," Michael agreed, "it's not finished. But it's started. That's something." They reached the clinic. Their clinic now. Shared space, shared purpose, shared commitment to demonstrating daily that caring transcends species when you let it. Michael's communicator chimed. Message from unknown sender. He opened it, curious. Nereth read over his shoulder. "Dr. Grant, this is Administrator Chen from the Colonial Expansion Program. We have new colony attempting human-Elir integration. They face same challenges you did. Same skepticism. Same fear. Would you and Commander Nereth consider serving as consultants, showing them what you built, teaching them the pattern?" Michael looked at Nereth. She looked at him. Unspoken conversation happening in glances and small expressions they'd learned to read. "Another colony," she said. "Another challenge. Another opportunity to prove that what we built can replicate. You want to go? I want to spread what we learned. Show others that transformation is possible, that caring costs everything and is worth it anyway. That single plate between strangers can become foundation for peace." She paused. "But only if you do, together or not at all." Michael thought about Sarah, about the photo he still carried, about peace she'd died trying to build, about how this work honored her memory better than grief ever could, about how caring meant continuing even when comfortable option was stopping. He typed response. Short, clear, committed. "We accept, send details. We'll show them what's possible." He sent it, looked at Nereth, found her smiling. That rare, genuine expression that said more than words. "Another colony?" she repeated. "Another group of skeptics needing proof that caring transcends species. Another opportunity to be challenged and to challenge in return." You miss it, Michael realized. The challenge, the proving, the transformation through impossible choices. I miss nothing. I simply recognize that what we did once needs doing everywhere. That pattern requires replication. That revolution spreads through demonstration, not declaration. They stood in the clinic's doorway, looking out at colony they'd helped transform, at people walking past in mixed groups, at children playing together without considering which species they belonged to, at peace manifesting through daily choices to care despite cost. We built this, Michael said, together, through challenge and sacrifice and stubborn refusal to accept that hate was inevitable. And now we build it elsewhere, show others the pattern, give them template for their own transformation. Nereth placed hand on his shoulder, that familiar gesture of connection and commitment. She asked for proof you care. You asked for proof I do. We answered. Now we teach others to ask and answer in their own ways. That night, Michael sat alone in his quarters, pulled Sarah's photo from his pocket for what he knew would be the last time needing to explain himself to her memory. I'm going to another colony, he told her image, with Narath, to spread what we built, to show others that transformation is possible, that caring costs everything and is worth it anyway. Sarah smiled at him from 3 years ago. He could almost hear her response, something about how proud she was, how this honored her better than grief, how she'd want him to continue building peace through impossible courage demonstrated daily. He put the photo away, not forgetting, just releasing, moving forward while carrying her with him, the way you should carry the dead, as inspiration, not anchor, as reminder of why caring matters, not excuse to stop trying. His communicator chimed again, message from Narath, no words, just coordinates and time. Meeting point for journey to new colony, new challenge, new opportunity to prove that what they'd built could replicate. He sent back single word, ready, then added, together? Her response came immediately, always, until you prove me wrong about humans, which you will not, because you are stubborn and caring and thoroughly infected with the belief that peace is possible. I blame myself. Michael laughed. Real laugh. The kind that came from joy instead of deflection, from hope instead of defense, from the knowledge that he wasn't alone in this impossible work of transforming hate into connection through stubborn daily caring. Another colony, another challenge, another group of skeptics needing proof that species boundaries were permeable, that caring transcended biology, that transformation required only courage and consistency and willingness to risk everything for someone who logic said you should hate. They'd proved it once, they'd teach others to prove it in their own ways. The pattern would spread, the revolution would continue, the legacy of a plate placed between strangers would become foundation for peace that neither species thought possible. 6 months ago, Narath had walked into his clinic and demanded proof that humans care. He'd spent weeks demonstrating pattern. She'd answered with impossible choice. Together they'd built something neither could build alone. Now they'd take it elsewhere, replicate it. Show others that what seemed miracle was available pattern. That transformation required only willingness to try, despite knowing it might cost everything. Michael Grant packed light. Medical supplies, change of clothes, Sarah's photo, the original plate from their first meeting, reminders of why caring matters, evidence that transformation is possible, proof that species boundaries blur when people brave enough to care despite cost. He met Narath at the transport station. She carried her own artifacts, reminders of war and peace, of violence and healing, of wounds that glowed in darkness and scars that transformed into symbols of connection. They boarded together, headed toward new colony, new challenge, new opportunity to demonstrate that caring transcends everything when you let it. The transport lifted off. Varela fell away behind them. Small world where they'd proved something impossible, where challenge became partnership, where two people stubborn enough to care had transformed entire colonies' understanding of what was possible. Ahead lay another world, another group of humans and Alir attempting coexistence, another opportunity to show that peace required more than treaties. It required people brave enough to sit at tables with enemies, to place plates between strangers and demand evidence, to answer through pattern and miracle simultaneously. Narath looked at Michael across the narrow transport cabin. Still waiting for the next dinner, human. He smiled, recognized the callback, the echo of transmission she'd sent months ago, the promise that their work wasn't finished just because challenge was answered. This time, he replied, I promise to cook better. They traveled toward new world, new challenge, new opportunity to prove that caring costs everything and is worth it anyway. That transformation is always available to those brave enough to attempt it. That species' boundaries blur when people choose connection over a comfortable separation. The question had been simple: prove that humans care. The answer had been complex. Years of pattern and single impossible choice, daily demonstration and sacrificial moment. Consistent caring and revolutionary transformation. Now they'd teach others to ask and answer, to challenge and be challenged, to build peace through stubborn refusal to accept that hate was inevitable. Together. Because that's what caring meant, not doing it alone, but finding partners brave enough to stand beside you, to challenge you, to prove alongside you that transformation is possible when people care more about each other than about comfortable hatred. They traveled toward New World, carrying evidence, spreading pattern, living proof that what seemed impossible becomes normal through repetition, that caring transcends species, that peace requires courage demonstrated daily. The transport moved through space, 2 people, 2 species, 1 partnership forged through impossible challenge and impossible answer. 1 commitment to spreading transformation across stars. She asked for proof. He asked for proof. They both answered. Now they'd teach others, show them the pattern, give them template for their own impossible transformations. Because that's what caring does. It costs everything, and it spreads through demonstration, through pattern, through stubborn daily choosing of connection over comfortable separation. They'd proved it. Now they'd prove it again and again, until everyone understood. Until caring was no longer revolutionary act but expected pattern. Until species boundaries became interesting detail instead of insurmountable barrier. Until peace meant more than temporarily suspended violence. 1 plate at a time, 1 challenge at a time, 1 impossible choice at a time. Together. Building the world they'd bled to prove possible. The world that said caring transcends everything when you're brave enough to let it. Proof accumulated, pattern replicated, and across stars, people began asking the same question that had started everything: not prove you care, but how do we care together? That was the real revolution. That was the legacy. That was the moment everything changed. 2 people, 1 plate, infinite possibility. The journey continued. The work remained. But they traveled together, and that was evidence enough. In the end, Michael and Nereth didn't prove that humans or Ilir were better than the stories told about them, only that a single choice, repeated often enough, can bend the trajectory of an entire world. Maybe that's all humanity ever is in the vastness of space. Stubborn creatures insisting that compassion counts, even when logic, law, and physics politely ask it to stop. And now comes the uncomfortable part. Not for them, but for us. What do we choose when caring becomes inconvenient? How far are we willing to go for someone we were taught to fear? And if peace really is built 1 plate at a time, whose table are we still too afraid to sit at? If you stayed with us through this entire journey, from the first untouched plate to the tribunal where 2 species finally blinked at the same time, write the anchor word, evidence, in the comments so I know you made it to the end. Tell me where on this little blue planet you're watching from. Subscribe to join this strange interstellar community. Hit like to keep these stories traveling. Share the video with someone who needs a reminder that caring is a revolutionary act. And stick around for the next chapter appearing right now on your screen. Because the galaxy may be big, but this conversation, it starts with you.